Chapter 2, Amazing Grace. Sitting on the bar stool in Petey's kitchen that fateful afternoon was a critical moment in my life. It started the process of my questioning long-held presuppositions about God, faith, and my own call to ministry. Looking back, I trace my trajectory toward becoming a hospice chaplain to that specific moment. The most pivotal event in my life, however, occurred nearly 20 years prior, on November 21st, 1971, the Feast of Christ the King, the day I first consciously experienced grace. I was just your average pimple-faced, fat, shy, insecure, sexually naive Catholic teenager who, having grown up in a small West Virginia town, now found himself thrust into the complexities of university life. It was my freshman year. I was an accidental theater student. I say accidental because I'd never really planned to study theater. During my orientation to college life, I was told I needed to have a major. Now, I'd never given much thought of being a collegian. I'd only applied to one school, West Virginia University, upon threat from my father, who'd never had the opportunity to go to college. I took the SATs the day before classes actually began, so as I stood in line to register for classes, I flipped a coin thinking I might like to be a lawyer or an actor. It came up tails, so I signed up for the acting classes. As a kid, I felt so insecure about being overweight that I developed a sharp tongue as a defense mechanism. If I made fun of other people, I wouldn't look so bad by comparison, or so the delusion went. Because I didn't like myself, I feared others wouldn't like me either if they really knew me. As a result, I had no real friends. People were afraid to get too close to me. Get too close, and I could slay you with my tongue. So I spent the first few months of my freshman year in college studying drama. I enjoyed acting. It was a lot more fun being someone other than me. Plus, there were lots of pretty girls around. One of the required courses for an acting degree was scene shop. The whole class consisted of building scenery for the school's theatrical performances. I was never really much good with my hands, but it was a required course. One day, as I was cutting some 2x4s with a power saw, a voluptuous young actress in a low-cut leotard walked by. Paying more attention to her bouncing bosom than to my boards, I pulled the power saw across my left index finger. Blood started spewing out everywhere. It's not a great way to meet girls. After several hours at the University Hospital emergency room, I got on the elevator to head home. When the doors closed, I realized I wasn't alone. A Catholic priest was with me in the elevator car. I awkwardly said hi. He was pretty outgoing, and by the time we hit the ground floor, he had invited me to attend a retreat at a local Franciscan friary the following weekend. As we parted, he said the magic words, "There'll be girls there." Since it was a Friday, I decided to knock off the rest of my day, skipping 3 more classes, and went drinking with some guys I knew. After effectively anesthetizing the pain from my throbbing finger and lonely heart with some cheap beer, I overheard some attractive girls in the next booth talking about going on a retreat the next weekend. I wasn't very spiritual, but even I could tell this was a sign from God. So I went back to the dorm room in a buzzed stupor, filled out the paperwork the priest had given me, and registered for the retreat. I wasn't seeking truth, just girls. The retreat was unlike anything I'd encountered in my 19 years of life. People were hugging each other and constantly saying, "Praise the Lord." College-age students were carrying Bibles around. A buddy I'd conned into coming with me questioned what I'd gotten us into. To make things worse, the cute girls I'd overheard at the bar were a no-show. The weekend consisted of students sharing their own spiritual experiences with Jesus in lecture format, followed by small discussion groups. I found it all very strange. While I believed they had discovered something that seemed really good for them, it was nothing I was interested in. By Sunday morning, I'd had enough. Another discussion group was about to begin, and I didn't think I could take it. Miraculously, at that very moment, the priest from the elevator I'd met asked if I'd like to go into the chapel and pray instead. Happy for any excuse to avoid the dreaded discussion group where I would be expected to self-disclose, I jumped at the chance. I figured I could pray silently and continue hiding my fears of being vulnerable. On the way to the chapel, another retreatant wanted to speak with the priest, so he sent me in ahead, alone. When I entered the chapel, I just laid down on the floor to rest. I really wasn't thinking about anything in particular. When I looked at the tabernacle, where the elements of communion are stored, it was an unexpected moment of illumination, as if a light had gone on inside me. Somehow I knew Jesus was really there. In the felt holiness of the moment, I closed my eyes. A picture emerged in my mind's eye. I saw Jesus splayed out horizontally on the cross, ready to have the nails punched through his hands, and from my vantage point, I could see that the face of the nailer, it was me. I had the hammer in my hand. I was the one driving the nails. I looked straight into Jesus' eyes, and he looked back at me. I'll never forget that look. It's been over 50 years. But when I close my eyes right now, I can still see that look. I see the compassion, the love, but most of all, the acceptance. Those eyes pierced into my being. In that moment, I understood that Jesus died for me. I was responsible for his death. Every time I'd wounded others, I'd wounded him. He died in my place. He died for me. Another image flashed into my mind. Again, it was Jesus on the cross, but this time the picture was very much like Salvador Dali's Christ of St. John of the Cross. I felt if I were somewhere in space looking down on Jesus as he hung there, suspended with the whole earth beneath him. I realized Jesus had died not just for me, but for everyone. He died to save us all. I started crying. I was overwhelmed. I had the sensation of my scalp being peeled back like a sardine tin, while forgiveness washed over me and love poured into me. I was shaking and crying. I remember praying, Jesus, I don't love you. I don't even know you. But if you teach me about yourself, I'll give myself to you. If you can make anything good come out of my life, I'll live it for you. Well, at that point, the priest entered the chapel and knelt down next to me. With some concern in his voice, he asked what was going on and if I'd like to pray aloud with him. I did. He led me in a prayer to give my life to Christ. Now, some call this being born again. Some call it conversion. One of my favorite writers, Brennan Manning, calls it being seized by the great affection. I don't know how long I stayed in the chapel, skinny dipping in the pool of grace, as a friend of mine likes to say. But I remember that eventually all the other retreatants came in for Mass, and I remember we sang Amazing Grace. Of course, I'd heard the song before. As a disc jockey at a local radio station, I'd played Judy Collins' version. It was a top 40 hit. But that Sunday afternoon, I felt as though I were hearing the song for the first time. In that moment, I understood the words with the totality of my being. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. For the first time in my life, I experienced total acceptance, blemishes and all, by the great someone who knew all about me, the one from whom I could never hide. The tragic irony is that after experiencing the amazing grace of acceptance that afternoon in meeting Jesus, for the next 20 years I became a willing participant in the "my way is the only way to God" legalism, a legalism unaccepting of anyone who is different from me and who didn't share my spiritual experience. Mercifully, by traveling the road to death with my friend Petey, God's awful grace would begin to help liberate me from this religious blindness.